We must stand up.
We must stop preaching.
Show a little bit of guts.
People looking.
It is time for us as Christians to stand up, to move out, to do
We
something.
must stand for truth.
Hi, my name is Dr. Terry Jones. This is the Braveheart Show, and Islam is of the devil. Today we're going to talk about the myth, the lie. We have heard it repeated many, many times. The separation of church and state. Always all of the liberals, anti-God people, as soon as the church stands up, as soon as the church does anything, they start yelling that. As though it is in the Constitution, of which it is not. It is not in the Constitution. In fact, we're going to see today that you will not find that terminology in the Constitution, that in fact the Founding Fathers had something totally different in mind. In fact, they were pro-church. They were pro-Ten Commandments. We're going to see today that actually they knew that government could not be run correctly. Government could not be run fairly unless God and the Ten Commandments were involved in it. George Washington said, "It is impossible to rightly govern a nation without God and the Bible." George Washington, our founding father. George Washington said it is impossible. That's an absolute. That means it cannot be done. There is no discussion. He said it is impossible to rightly govern a nation without God and the Bible. In fact, if you go to Washington, D.C., you will find that God and the Bible, and especially the Ten Commandments, are to be found everywhere. As you walk up the steps of the building that houses the Supreme Court, at the top of that building, there are men. These figures and these men are called the law givers of the world. All of these men are facing one man in the middle who is facing straight forward. That one man in the middle is Moses. And Moses is carrying the Ten Commandments. That is what our country is based upon. The liberals, the anti-God, people would try to convince us that our founding fathers wrote that phrase, separation of church and state, which they did not. What the Constitution actually says, it guarantees the freedom of religion. And that the government would establish no religion or would favor one religion above another. But nowhere, again, is it found in our Constitution the separation of church and state. In fact, just the opposite. There, right there, above that building, above the doors that houses the Supreme Court, stands Moses with the Ten Commandments. We must return to God. Churches must stand up and speak out. As you enter the Supreme Court, there are two huge doors. Engraved in those doors is the Ten Commandments. As you go inside of the courtroom, right there where the judges sit, right above the judges of the Supreme Court, you find again the Ten Commandments. You find that everywhere. All over Washington, all over the Capitol grounds, you find Bible verses and Bible verses. Of the 55 founders of the Constitution, the 52 of them belonged to an established Orthodox church. They were church goers. They were church members. They were people who believed in God. They were people like Washington who believed in that statement. It is impossible, as they put the Constitution together, as they built those buildings, as they engraved in that building, right in the center, Moses with the Ten Commandments. On the doors, as you enter into the Supreme Court, again the Ten Commandments. Above the judges, again the Ten Commandments. That took effort. That took energy. These were men who were intelligent. These were men who were putting together the greatest worldly document in the world, the Constitution of the United States. This was a time in history. This was a God-appointed time. This was a divine time. This was not something that just happened. This was something that was put together. The United States was founded by people who believed in God, and they wanted us to know that. So what did they do? They made sure we knew it. At the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, and everywhere, you find the Ten Commandments, you find the Bible. Every session of Congress begins with prayer by a paid preacher that is paid with tax dollars since 1777. Every session of Congress begins with prayer. Why? Well, why was that established in 1777? Because the men at that time were smarter than the men at this time. The men at this time feel they are educated and prideful. The men at that time were educated and humble. Oh, they knew what they wanted. They knew the price of freedom. They knew they wanted some type of government where man was free and could govern himself. But they also knew their limitations. They also knew that man was actually evil. That man was very sinful. That man left without a foundation, without some type of rules and regulations, some type of guidelines, then the country would go and turn evil. Because people are evil. So what did they do? They set up the Bible and the Constitution. So they established in 1777 that every time Congress opened, decided to govern the country, make laws, that they had to first start with prayer. We must return to that. We must in our nation return back to God. How can now all of a sudden the principles that we have been living by for the last 220 years, how can they all of a sudden be wrong? They are not wrong. That is why the church must stand up. The church must stop hiding. The church is the worst of them all. When you try to get churches involved, they use this very same excuse: separation of church and state. Here, just a little while back, we had a demonstration in front of a pornography shop. We called over 100 churches in Gainesville, Florida. Not one of them showed up. You know what one of them told us? They said, "We don't get involved in politics." Our next demonstration will take place in front of the mosque here in Gainesville. Because in our world there's 1 million Muslims who are dying and going to hell. It is time for the church to stand up. We must call our nation back to where we were at. The Ten Commandments. But believing in God. It is said in the United States that 86% of the people believe in God. Then let us stand up. Let us join together. If we will stand up and join together, we cannot be defeated. We cannot be defeated. Let us stand up. Join with us. doveworld.org. Contact us. doveworld.org. God bless.
Dove World.